Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is Erica from Wisconsin Clean Cities, and today we are having our Clean Cities Best Practices for End Users for CNG, LPG, and Electricity webinar. We will be giving an overview of the available alternative fuels and technologies, the current best fleet practices, the Clean Cities tools that are available, and we will also have fleets from Wisconsin and Illinois talk about their firsthand experiences using alternative fuels and technologies. These webinars are funded by the Lake Michigan Corridor Alternative Fuel Implementation Initiative, which is supported by the Department of Energy through the Clean Cities Implementation Initiatives to Advance Alternative Fuel Markets program. Under these projects, local public and private partnerships are accelerating the deployment of alternative fuel vehicles and conducting public outreach and training in communities across the country. Since 1993, the Energy Department's Clean Cities initiative has supported community-led efforts to deploy vehicle and infrastructure technologies across a broad portfolio of our alternative fuels, helping to reduce America's reliance on petroleum. This webinar will be recorded and made available after the session on the Wisconsin Clean Cities, South Shore Clean Cities, and the Chicago Area Clean Cities website. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the question box, and we will get to them after the presentations are over. So with that being said, we have Ted Barnes from the Gas Technology Institute, who will be starting us off with an overview of the alternative fuels that are available and the current best fleet practices. So Ted, whenever you are ready.
Thank you very much. Good morning. This is Ted Barnes from Gas Technology Institute. Just a brief background on GTI. We're a nonprofit research and development lab down near Chicago. We've been operating for around, a little over 70 years doing clean energy research and have done a lot of R&D and deployment work on alt fuels for the past decades. This presentation will, as Erica mentioned, will go over best practices for propane, CNG, and electricity. The general objectives, we're going to do a quick introduction to each of these fuels and then go through how the fueling station basics, how the fueling process works. Of course, cover some safety topics, and then go through kind of typical applications of how these have been deployed. So I'm going to start going into the propane autogas discussion. Propane that they use in vehicles is the same propane that you may have in your backyard grill, or that in more rural areas have or places that don't have natural gas are used for residential heating or commercial heating. When it's transferred into a vehicle, it's a pressurized liquid. However, when exposed to ambient temperatures and pressures, it does become a gas. Like other vehicle fuels, gasoline and diesel, propane gas is heavier than air. Also very similar, propane is burned in a very similar engine, often the same engine, that it's been converted to run on propane as a gasoline or diesel vehicle. And when it is sold, it's typically sold by the liquid gallon, very similar to gasoline and diesel. So a difference is that it is pressurized to, in 200, 300 psi range. At that pressure, it will stay a liquid in the vehicle system in normal operating conditions. For safety and by code, the vehicle tanks are filled to about 80% of their volume. A filling station for propane autogas is very similar to a gasoline station. I have a cartoon image of one on the next slide here to go through. And the fill rates are similar, which is a very nice benefit for many fleets, from the 10 to 12 gallons a minute filling times. So here's just an image to give you an idea of a propane station. They can be very involved and have large canopies and have be very similar to a traditional gasoline station, and they can also be small, like you'll see at a U-Haul or someplace that you can fill up your propane tank for your grill. But the general parts are, there's a storage tank where the propane is stored. There's a pump that pumps the liquid to the dispenser, and then the dispenser puts the fuel into the vehicle. But in general, it's a very similar process to what your traditional fuels do. And we always like to cover safety hazards, and it's important to remember that all fuels, have situations and hazards with them that you need to be concerned with. And with any new operation, training and education is always key. So it's very important to remember when you're looking at new alt fuels that each specific fuel should, you should educate your employees on those. For propane, the hazards, similar to gasoline, propane is a flammable fuel. Ignition sources should not be in the fueling area, like cigarettes. Propane is stored at pressure, relatively low pressure, 200, 300 psi, but there are hazards of pressure. There can be freeze burn if you come in contact with liquid propane, and propane is also an asphyxiating gas. All of these hazard situations do not occur under normal operations, but they are things that you need to be aware of. Now moving on to natural gas. CNG is the vehicle fuel. It's the same natural gas that comes to your stove or your hot water heater or your furnace if you're on a natural gas pipeline. It's mostly methane. Throughout the process from the meter all the way into your vehicle, it stays as a gas. We're not going to cover LNG or liquefied natural gas in this presentation, though there are applications that are coming up more and more for LNG as well. So unlike gasoline, diesel, and even propane, natural gas is lighter than air and always in a gaseous form. However, it is burned in the same kind of internal combustion engine as a traditional vehicle. When natural gas is sold at a station, it's sold in the gasoline gallon equivalent. It's not sold by a liquid gallon just because it's not a liquid. But what the natural gas industry has done is it sells it with the same energy content. So when you buy a gallon of natural gas, you're getting the same fuel economy essentially as you would with a traditional gasoline, at least. Natural gas CNG is stored at high pressures, so 3,600 psi is kind of the nominal pressure. That's at a settled pressure once filling is done. 70-degree day, 3,600 is where your tank should be at full. There are, during filling, it heats up. On hotter days, you can fill up to 4,500 psi so that it would settle down to 3,600 at 70 degrees. Fueling is typically done at a fast fill CNG station. The fill rate's about 5 to 10 gallons a minute. There are higher flow nozzles available. You can also have time fill for fleets that stay parked overnight in the same location. It's a slower process. It can take 4 to 10 hours. It depends on the size of your compressor and the number of vehicles, but it could be a lower cost option for larger fleets. Fast fill is similar to a gasoline station with a dispenser filling the vehicle. And home fueling can also be done. There's a residential appliance you can put in your garage, and a very slow fill overnight if you have an individual vehicle. So CNG Station Basics, you have a gas meter that are very similar to what you'll have at your home or commercial buildings. There's a dryer that takes out any moisture that's in the gas, a compressor that raises the pressure from your line pressure up to approximately 3,600, and then sends the gas to storage, and then the storage flows the gas to the dispenser and into the vehicle. Safety hazards for CNG, similar to all of these fuels, CNG is a flammable gas. Ignition sources are forbidden in fueling areas. CNG is stored at very high pressures, and high pressures can pose risk to operators. And natural gas is also an asphyxiating gas, which can displace oxygen if trapped in an enclosure. The final fuel that I'll give you a general background on here is electricity. So electricity is the same electricity that you have in your house typically. You have AC power that's delivered to your charging station. The technology term is the electric vehicle supply equipment. And then the AC power is typically converted to DC power in the vehicle. The reason that is that it's stored in the battery as DC power, and then DC drives the vehicle's electric motor. So that's another difference. It's a completely different drivetrain. You have an electric motor rather than internal combustion engine. Electricity is typically sold at kilowatt hour. When charging stations are used commercially, there's a variety of different ways that people have used for charging. Some have monthly subscriptions, some have a per hour charge, some have a price for hooking up, or some charge per kilowatt hour, and there's other models out there as well. So some of the basics for EV charging, there's different rates at which an EV can be charged. Level 1 is your simplest. It's analogous to an extension cord from a wall outlet plugging into your vehicle. It also has slower fill times because of the lower power. 7 to 16 hours is a broad range, but it depends on the size of your battery pack. If you're filling up a volt battery that can has 30-mile range, it's very different than if you're filling up a Leafs battery that has 100-mile range, and very different from a heavy-duty application. Level 2 charging is approximately twice as fast, 3 to 7 hours, and then DC fast charging allows for high power, and the power is converted from AC to DC in the fast charging unit, and then the DC is delivered directly to the vehicle. It can be done at faster rates. You can get to 80% capacity in 30 minutes, roughly, depending on your battery size, of course. So the basics of a EVSE charging station, this here has 240 volts, a level 2 charger. EVSE has a control device, a cord that you plug into your vehicle. This is the charger that I was referring to that turns AC to DC, and then it's stored in a battery. So for safety hazards for electricity, the same electricity most people are very comfortable with as well, but there are energy hazards, potential fire, shock hazards, and then as the voltage and current increase, your risk potentially increase as well. So to cover some of the best practices and applications, these are general topics that I like to cover. There's always outliers. There's always specifics to any application, but this is just to go over where these fuels are used, some of the possible applications. The great things, and the reason that we're talking a lot about alt fuels nowadays, is they're all a triple win. You have economic advantages from fuel savings, you have environmental benefits from reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and you have energy security benefits. All these fuels are predominantly created or sourced in America, or at least North America, and are very helpful in that manner as well. All of these fuels have dedicated and biofuel options, and by that mean there are vehicles available that can run on the alternative fuel, and they also can run on traditional fuel, a gasoline or a diesel. An important thing to remember on all activities is that there's things you can do without having to switch fuels. Idle reduction and driver training are always the first steps to greening your fleet. Other general practices, training your personnel from top to bottom is key to every safe deployment of a new vehicle fuel. Also getting buy-in from the whole organization is very important, and that can't be understated. You know, getting drivers comfortable with a new fuel and a new type of vehicle, getting maintenance personnel, that can really make or break a deployment. At this time, I guess I'd like to ask some of the other panelists that have had experience, you know, integrating these fuels into their fleets, if they could comment to any of this. I guess start with Jeff from Paper Transit. If you could make any comments to, you know, getting buy-in from your organization and training and the importance that's been to you guys throughout the process.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, and it's, you know, part of what I would talk about in my presentation. But, you know, it is going to be a change. It doesn't matter which one of these fuels you use and what fuel you were using in the past. If you're going to make a change, people need to understand that, and education about why you're making the change, we found, is a really big deal. And then once people understand that, hey, it's not going to be the same. There are going to be some challenges, but ultimately the benefits outweigh those challenges.
Jeff from Milwaukee, do you have...
Actually, we've gotten some really great buy-in from our employees, because most of our natural gas vehicles are heavy-duty refuse trucks. So these are drivers that are out there every day listening to this noisy diesel engine sitting there chugging their ear and working behind that truck all day as well. And one of the first things that they told me afterwards is that guys are starting to fight for our natural gas trucks because they're so much quieter. And at the end of the day, a guy's ears are not ringing, or we get less complaints from people in the neighborhood about that noisy truck waking them up at 6 in the morning. So that's been a great buy-in. And the policymakers, they're just ecstatic at the fuel savings, because we're saving about $6,500 in fuel costs every year for each one of these trucks that we have on the road.
Thank you. And Gene from Alpha, do you have any comments to this?
I have the same comments as Jeff. Our drivers love them. You know, driving around in a spread step van, the noise could drive you crazy, actually, when these trucks are so much quieter. We don't have to plug them in the winter, so we're saving electricity there. And our drivers get, you know, they're driving around in aluminum trucks, and they get much better heat from their vehicle versus a diesel vehicle. We're putting less pollution in the air. We train all our drivers to fuel them, and they love them. They love the trucks. They love the power. We didn't lose any power. And our operating costs, it came down, you know, we took a little hit when the propane spiked, but our operating costs came down significant.
Great, thanks. And just for those that, you know, the real key is knowing your vehicle types and the driving characteristics and selecting the correct alternative fuels for your needs. Erica will cover a lot of the Department of Energy tools, but I wanted to bring up the Fleet DNA tool that covers that topic specifically, and the website here you can go to. So what I'd like to do here quickly is kind of go over some of the typical applications, and it's always hard to talk about typical applications because nothing's really typical, and there'll always be things that are outside of this. But I just wanted to give some of the, you know, to show some areas that these vehicles and these alt fuels have really been used and where they apply normally. So for propane, one bullet here is that there's a low fueling station cost and you know, low cost of making any maintenance garage upgrades or anything, and so that low upfront capital investment can be a huge advantage for some businesses. Other highlights for propane, that is a very high range limitation because it's a liquid fuel, very high energy density. It applies to many fleet size. You probably don't want just to have one propane vehicle maybe, unless you have a public fueling station nearby, but it can go to a very large fleet as well. The vehicle classes that propane does best is light and medium duty. Typically, you kind of think of, if there's a gasoline vehicle for it, there's probably a propane vehicle for it. Not that there aren't outliers on that for sure. As you can see here, there's some pretty large vehicles. Fuel usage, you save your money back is for each gallon you use, so the more fuel you use, the better. It's a fast filling fuel, so you can do 24/7 operations. As I mentioned, stations costs are low, and it's always hard to give station costs because every station is different, and so these are very rough. But the propane suppliers will often supply a tank for you at their cost if you sign an agreement with them. So the cost of a station can be as simple as putting down concrete pads and fencing and other safety requirements. And then you can also have a larger station more involved. And then I tried to do kind of a comparison here with fuel costs per year. This is just a rough scenario. For a fleet vehicle that drove 25,000 miles a year, if you had a light-duty vehicle, average 26 miles an hour, miles per gallon, and $2.67 per gallon. I reference where these numbers come from just because all of those numbers will change instance by instance. But that came to a fuel cost of $2,500 a year, roughly. So for CNG, typical applications, and the typical sweet spot is for very high fuel use vehicles. It's because it has a very low cost per gallon equivalent, and so the more gallons you use, the quicker you pay back. The range limitations, you can get a whole lot of fuel on a vehicle nowadays. They have up to 150 gallons on some of the heavy-duty trucks, but then on light-duty vehicles, sometimes you have 8 or 9 gallons. So it really varies by your vehicle. Fleet size, the larger the fleet, the better, just because if you have to buy your own station or put in your own fueling infrastructure, you want to have a lot of fuel going through it to get your payback. CNG plays well across all vehicle classes, light, medium duty. As I mentioned, high fuel use is great. Because you can do fast filling, your time of day, you can do 24/7 operations of your vehicles. Station costs can be low if you have a very small compressor and you're only filling, 3 or 4 vehicles. As I mentioned, you could have a one-vehicle home refueler, but that's not really the typical application. And then you can have a very large commercial station, that costs millions of dollars. As you can see, the price can be very low on the fuel cost savings just because if you have an average commercial sale price of $1.83, you're spending about $1,500 a year. So for EVs, you have a different kind of vehicle mix. The typical vehicle is probably a smaller light-duty vehicle, though there are some limited larger vehicles as well. Your range is typically less because the battery packs have less energy density. The time of filling can be longer, so your duty cycle is a little more important. Where EVs definitely shine are their station costs can be very low. The fuel costs can be very low as well because you're paying just for the electricity potentially. And then, of course, there's zero tailpipe emissions, and an electric motor has very high efficiency, so it's more efficient than an internal combustion engine, and so it can lead to wonderful, local environmental benefits. that's my last slide, acknowledgement of support from the DOE. I want to thank you all for your time. I'll pass you off to the fleets now. I believe Gene from Alpha is going to go first, and they'll give you a lot more detail on their fuels and their fleets.
All right, yes, thank you, Ted. Next we have Gene Heck from Alpha Baking Company, like Ted mentioned, who will be talking about his experience of implementing propane into his fleet. So go ahead, Gene.
We had 22 vehicles we replaced in our Aurora depot. We felt that was the right thing to do for our pollution and being more self-sufficient, for economy, for the United States not buying fuel. We put our own fuel station in, and it seems to be working out great. We had Feral Gas as our provider to come out, and they train all our drivers for safety to make sure that we've done everything right. It was to reduce injuries or any kind of injuries to our drivers. We have no incidents yet. Right now, all our drivers love the trucks. They're much quieter. We don't have to plug them in at night to make sure they start, so we had no worries of them starting in the wintertime like you do with diesel. You worry about the trucks gelling up. All in all, I think it was a great move on our company's part to go green.
Yeah, if I could, this is Bob McGuire with Alpha Baking also, and apologize for jumping on a little late here. Gene and I work in tandem, and I'd just like to add that, yeah, not only we've been pleased, but I think one of the things that was also a little bit interesting now that we've been into it for a year is that I think what we found was it was a lot easier to get into this application than I first thought it would be. I think the mystery surrounding alternative fuels and all of that, what it would take from an infrastructure standpoint and support and financing and all the rest of that was going to be more complex than it actually was. We work with some great partners, a lot of people out there are willing to help you, they're willing to basically turn on the dime with you. We worked heavily with Roush and Ford and Feral Gas, like Gene mentioned. Our trucks are dedicated 100% LPG driven. They are not a hybrid of some sorts where they also can run on gasoline or diesel. And overall, I would say that the amount of support, field support that we've gotten from our suppliers, along with Penske that does a lot of our maintenance, has been really great and been there for us. So the thing I would add to this whole thing was it was a lot easier to get into it than I first thought. And then the other thing would be that we've got an awful lot of accolades for basically getting into this and why we got into it, and the reasons we came. It was one of those deals where it was kind of like after we've gotten into it, now you look back on it and you go, geez, it wasn't really all that great of a decision when you think about it. We shouldn't be applauded for being so intelligent. You look back on it now, it's almost a no-brainer. The one thing I would suggest that would be out there that we basically, if anything, should be commended for might be because we took a little bit of a risk. Entering into alternative energy or entering into an arena that basically is somewhat new to a lot of us, to a lot of people. So there's always that element of risk that goes along with newness and change and all the rest of it. So if there was a reason to basically be commended for going down this path and going down this strategy was because maybe we took some risk, and at the end of the day, we hoped that would pay off. And obviously it has. But we really, at the end of the day, shouldn't be basically congratulated for making a great decision, because at the end of the day, based on the facts that were just presented in terms of why do this, you look back on it now and you go, geez, it was kind of a no-brainer. We weren't that intelligent after all. So at the end of the day, I think it's been a real success story.
Our experience has been with all CNG tractors, over-the-road Class 8 18-wheelers. And we've been running our trucks. We actually started in February of 2010 with our first tractor. And so, when I started doing the research on CNG 4.5 years ago, it was a lot more difficult than what it was today, just because no one else was doing it. So we've got over 7 million miles at this point on our CNG trucks. And, the reasons that we got into it are still the same today, and they've been talked about already, the economic benefits of a lower cost fuel, the environmental benefits, and the fact that it's American fuel versus foreign oil. And then there's also some of the, the soft benefits of being a leader in the industry and the recognition that you get from that. and some of the opportunities that it's created with customers for us. But one of the things I would mention a little bit already, if you are going to make a change, there certainly are some things that are going to be different. You got to be committed to it, and you got to have that desire to be better than everyone else that's out there. So if I look at all the things that we needed to, get started with CNG and make it work, first of all, it's finding the fuel availability. Today, I think there is 20-some stations in the state of Wisconsin. I'm sure that will be mentioned later when Clean Cities talks, or you can, there's websites out there that you can go and find the stations. So the station availability is much better today than what it used to be. There's probably 3 different companies just in Wisconsin building stations. The equipment availability is much better as well. 4.5 years ago when I started looking into this, I called the dealerships or the OEMs, and the local dealers never even heard of natural gas powered trucks. Today they've all sold vehicles and sold trucks and are working on them in their shops, so they have a lot more experience with that and just understanding vehicles a lot better. Also, there's more engines available that run on natural gas. When we got started, we were running there's a Cummins Westport engine. Is only a 9-liter engine with only 320 horsepower, which really isn't big enough for our application. Today, Cummins has the 12-liter engine available, which is 400 horsepower with 1,450 foot-pounds of torque. So that really works for us in our over-the-road applications. The engine that we need long-term to be able to run this in our regional applications as well. When making natural gas work, it's really all about how many miles can you get on the truck per year, because certainly there's going to be an incremental cost in the truck, and that can range anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000 of incremental upfront capital cost. But then on the fuel side, today natural gas is selling anywhere from $1.90 a gallon to maybe $2.30 a gallon, which is a significant savings over the $4 diesel. So getting that capital payback, it all depends how many miles you run. In our application, we run a little more than 100,000 miles per year on our trucks, so we get payback in probably 4 to 5 years. One of the other things you got to look at is the MPG. There is a significant loss in MPG when you're moving to the natural gas truck, just because of some of the inefficiencies of that engine. They haven't fully perfected that engine, like they have been working on the diesel engine for 70 or 80 years. But we think over time that gap will narrow with the MPG between the natural gas and the diesel truck. Some of the other things to look at is, where you're going to have your vehicles maintained, because there are some special requirements for the maintenance vehicles if you're going to have or maintenance shops if you're going to have a natural gas vehicle in there. Because the main thing I want to say is that the hurdles today are much lower than what they were a few years ago, just because of how many people are now running these vehicles. The fueling infrastructure is out there, and the dealerships are much more familiar with them. So for us, it's been a very positive experience and created a lot of new opportunities, a lot of growth for our company. I just see alternative fuels continuing to grow into the future. So that's kind of my experience and what I wanted to share at this time. And Stephanie, I don't know if you can go to the next person.
All right, yes, thank you, Jeff. Up next we have Jeff Tews from the City of Milwaukee, who will be talking about his experience implementing CNG and electricity into his fleet.
Good morning, everybody. Jeff Tews here from the City of Milwaukee. I'm the fleet manager. Real quickly, are you seeing anything other than my
unmuted
presentation up there right now?
Nope. You are good to go. You are good to go.
Okay.
Jeff.
Okay. All right. First and foremost, I just wanted to say welcome, everybody. We have a very diverse fleet of equipment at the City of Milwaukee, and you just get an idea of some of the different types of vehicles we have and the amount of fuel that we use per year. The CNG right now, we are actually measuring it here in diesel gallon equivalents because most of our CNG vehicles are formerly diesel vehicles. I'll get into that in just a moment here. The heavy trucks that we have include the 21 refuse packers. We have another 22 on order right now. We also have small I should say mid-sized cars, and we have 5 cargo vans that are running on CNG. Let's see here. I'm trying to move ahead. Okay. The CNG and in general, the alternative fuels are really nothing new for us. We actually tried back in 1980 and in 1992 with a couple of different CNG initiatives. And one of the picture on the left there is of a Chevy Cavalier, where we converted the engine to run either gasoline or natural gas. And the picture on the right is the remnants of our old CNG station that was able to fill 1 vehicle per day. And so that back in 1980, that didn't really do us a whole lot of good. Our current units, though, and this is beginning in 2010, we have the 15 rear-loading refuse packers, the 6 automated side-loading. They do have the Cummins ISL-G engine at 320 horse. That's the largest at the time that we could get. The truck on the left actually has the 42 DGE tanks, and what we found, if you didn't have a good source of fuel, sometimes we had to refuel that truck a couple of times a day. The truck on the right has the 80 DGE tanks built into that black Cascade right behind the cab. And unlike what you may have been reading in some of the trade magazines lately, where someone is claiming to have the first CNG snowplow in Wisconsin, we've been doing it with our trucks since 2010. What we've noticed is that the power on these trucks, especially when plowing snow, has not diminished whatsoever. Now, we have our own fueling stations that we built, and I'm sure Ted might appreciate this. This is the station over at our Lincoln facility, where we have 2 250-horse electric motor-driven compressors, and then we have the 2 3-stage storage cascades, one in the back here behind the fence. We have another one up front in our building because the stations were grant-funded, and because of that, one of the provisos was that we needed to provide CNG retail for customers outside of the city. Normally, we just would use fuel cards for our own vehicles, and the public didn't have access to those. But we were all too glad to do it, especially because we had this humongous compressing station for our vehicles where we can fill probably, I think, like 11 vehicles within a 1-hour period at 75 DGEs from nothing to fully compressed, which is phenomenal. This is the fueling station access from the outside the street. It's available 24/7. We have both 3,000 and 3,600 PSI available for the older vehicles that still run on 3,000 PSI. And it's credit card access only. It's open 24/7. The rear access for our other trucks is strictly 3,600 PSI. Requires an employee card or a mag stripe identification card. But we also wanted to get into hopefully saving a little bit of electricity with regards to the slow fill portion of our system. Now, unlike some of the other people that we know have a slow fill where they just hook 20, 40 vehicles up at the end of the day, and just the system comes on maybe at 8 at night or so and saves a little bit of electricity, we actually want to know exactly how much fuel went into each vehicle. So what we did is we built what we call a sequential time fill. And it works very simply. You need to authorize the truck. You plug it in, you hook up the hose, hook up your block heater if it's a little bit cold in the winter, and then you authorize with your fuel card. And when the station kicks in, it will fill 1 vehicle at a time, and then it moves to the next and so on, but it records each transaction. Now, some of the problems that we've noticed with our CNG, and this is something that you may run into down the road, is we've had some leaks. And the picture on the left there, you have the 3 large tanks in the cascade here. One of them has a rag tied around it. There was an O-ring that started leaking right where that rag is, and rather simple fix, but it caused a little bit of panic when the driver heard this hissing and he sees this white smoke and you smell gas. So it created a little bit of panic. But after things like this have occurred on occasion, I think we've had like 3 instances in 4 years with 21 trucks at this point. People learn, okay, you hear the hissing, you've got to get around to the other side of those tanks and you've got to shut those valves off one at a time. And they were able to isolate the leak by doing that. And then they still were able to drive the truck in using one of the other tanks. In other words, they opened the valve, they didn't hear any hissing. There was still enough fuel in the system and in that one tank that they could limp home. We've also found with some of the storage cascades, like the one on the right there, they have relief valves built into them too. Now, if your system has a little bit of moisture in it and it gets very cold, you might find those relief valves freezing up a little bit. And we actually had a couple instances where a relief valve would actually kick and vent fuel. Now we were able again to isolate that. But we had to have the fuel maintenance people come down and replace all of those relief valves. We've also had instances where people may have connected their private vehicle up to get gas, and for some reason they didn't have a great connection and they heard hissing. We've had people that would go and hit the emergency shutdown switch, or the ESD, and at that point you're all done until somebody comes back and restarts the system. We've also had 2 instances where people drove off with the hose connected. Fortunately, in our case, we have surveillance video. We were able to identify the person and track them down. They really did not appreciate the bill that we sent to them to fix it up, but I mean, what are we supposed to do? I mean, it was a lot of money that we had to spend to get it back up and running the first time. So those are some of the things that we have noticed. Regarding the electric equipment that we have, I'm sorry, is somebody trying to talk there? Okay, sorry about that. The electric equipment include a Chevy Volt, which of course, it looks great when you say 277 miles per gallon. We also have 16 hybrid cars. Regarding that plug-in, it should be noted that we've only put 41 gallons of fuel into it all this time. So we don't exactly know the electric costs. We also have hybrid electric and hybrid SUV cars. Now I do see that there's a question here that was posed by someone. Can you address the fuel economy? And I think what I'll do is I'm just going to back up to one of these refuse packers that we have here. These trucks, believe it or not, are nowhere near as efficient as something that's over the road. And by that I mean we're getting about 1.9 miles per gallon with these trucks. But bear in mind, that's because their main duty is to pull up in front of someone's house, idling and compressing the garbage in the back of the packer using hydraulics, and then they move on to the next site. We've actually noticed about a 0.2 of a mile, maybe 0.3 of a mile reduction in fuel economy from the diesels at 2.1 to the CNGs at about 1.8 to 1.9. And let's see, that's the end of my program. And if there are any questions or if anybody else wants to chime in at this point, please do.
From Paper Transit, could you maybe chime in on the fuel efficiency of the 9-liter and the 12-liter CWI engines compared to your diesels? Maybe Jeff's not still on the call.
We can check back with him later.
Yeah,
see if he
yeah, we
gets
can.
back on. Okay, well, thank you, Jeff. Last we have Stephanie Smith from South Shore Clean Cities talking about the web-based tools and resources that are available for alternative fuels and vehicles.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Erica?
Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome. Well, now that we have a little short on time since we had some issues earlier, I'll go through quickly. Again, this will be available on our websites afterwards. But these are the Clean Cities web-based tools and resources. They provide information on several web-based tools that are available through the Department of Energy's Clean Cities program. And they help public sector and private sector and general public better understand the use of alternative fuels and advanced vehicles. Oop. Okay. So these three websites provide comprehensive information for the Clean Cities programs and its portfolio of technologies. So our websites, the Clean Cities websites, contain information about the program, our accomplishments, partners, coalitions, and there's actually over close to 100 coalitions in the United States and parts of Canada. So, you know, Chicago, Wisconsin, and South Shore, Northern Indiana Clean Cities were just 3 that are working together for this program. But the Clean Cities general website contains information as far as like fueleconomy.gov, partnerships between US EPA and Department of Energy, and the Alternative Fuel Data Center, which is what we're mainly going to be covering today, that goes over information, data, and tools that are related to all the technologies and fuels in the Clean Cities portfolio. So these are, let's look at the Clean Cities website, which provides information about the program and ways to connect with Clean Cities coalitions. 2 great features on this website are the financial opportunities and information resources. So expanding a little bit on that, as far as we all know, funding is important and it's considered for every project. Everybody's always concerned about their bottom line. So Clean Cities can help you identify and apply for federal funding resources, and the financial opportunities section in this Clean Cities website provide the most up-to-date information on solicitations from federal and state agencies. So if you see any opportunity that is applicable to your organization, please contact your local Clean Cities coalition. Most of the people on the call today are with Wisconsin, Chicago, and South Shore Clean Cities, and we can help you apply for these fundings. And I recommend visiting it often because it changes. Some things come up and go quicker than you might know. So the next one is the information resource section of the website. In this section, you have access to newsletters, fact sheets, handbooks, and other documents that can keep you up to date on the latest changes in the industry. A great way to stay up to date with the Clean Cities program is to get the newsletter. We all have our own separate newsletter as well for each coalition that is on the call today, and most of you receive those. And the Clean Cities now also provides information on events throughout the year for all of the Clean Cities coalitions. So this next slide for the Clean Cities News, it offers several sources of information, blogs, news feeds, YouTube channel, which you all saw earlier with alpha baking. That is part of our Motor Week section. And there's many different widgets too that you can share information with on your website and different audiences. So just make sure that you stay on those lists. And let's just go. This was the one that we use the most here in our office in South Shore Clean Cities. It's the Alternative Fuel Data Center, also known as AFDC. And it's a great place for information about alternative fuels and advanced vehicles, as well as the fueling infrastructure that supports them. The site contains in-depth information about biodiesel, electric, ethanol, hydrogen, natural gas, and propane, as well as the strategies to conserve fuel. The AFDC site has a searchable database of laws, incentives, a large collection of maps and data, a collection of deployment case studies, and a searchable publications database of hundreds of documents. And there's also, we'll get to that in a second, there's an app for, I know somebody was talking about pricing of fuels and everything. So it highlights different tools, everything that is of interest to you. And if you are unsure of where to find the information, at the top here, there's the search bar, and that can be very helpful to find the information you're looking for. So as far as the price reports, one resource on the AFDC, they have a quarterly newsletter. It gives you real-world prices for conventional and alternative fuels. Fuel price data is collected. All of our Clean Cities staff does a quarterly price report, which some of you we may have contacted to gather your pricing information if you are a fuel provider. And that comes from all of the Clean Cities coalitions across the United States to give the price report breakdown as you see on the AFDC website. It includes a chart, shows pricing trends for alternative fuels as compared to gasoline and diesel, and the data can be helpful in planning alternative fuel projects for your region to inform policymakers on financial aspects of potential projects. So this next
part, at this point, I'm sorry, this is Jeff from City of Milwaukee. I just wanted to maybe point something out real quick here. There are several websites out there that do offer latest and greatest pricing on various alternative fuels around your region. They do it by zip code, but I wanted to point out that we've noticed some of these are not exactly up-to-date or accurate, and sometimes you'll see some of these fuel price hasn't been updated for several months at a time when, in all honesty, it does change quite often. We also have seen in the past some of our sites were out there listed as being much higher than they actually were. So I guess it really depends. It's good to have a valuable, accurate site out there to check those prices.
Unmuted.
Thanks, Jeff. Let me get back to, I know there was a question that just came in too that asks for where you can find, let me pull it up. Where can you find historic pricing for gas in your state or for alternative fuel or in your state? And that would also be on the, going back here, they have the past results of pricing as well on the AFDC fuel price report. So I can't do it at this very moment, but I can definitely search it for you and send you that information just because you have to plug in a few informational parts on the website. So for the laws and incentives page on the AFDC website, you can search federal and state. If you have any questions regarding available funding in your state, this is a great way to browse all the availability that you have and the different opportunities in your area. You can find your search for specific opportunities related to specific fuels that you may be looking into or different vehicles that you're interested in. And if you want to print, look for information laws, such as, or attend the events such as the Energy Independence Summit and all the other events that are going on throughout the year that are located on all of our Wisconsin, South Shore, and Chicago websites. And the next slide, real quick here, is the AFDC Maps and Tools. This is a vast collection of data to easy-to-read charts and maps to help policymakers, fleet managers, and technology providers, general public, just information about where the infrastructure in vehicles and for the geographic information if you wanted to analyze technology trends in future technologies for your organization. The next slide is the Petroleum Reduction Planning Tool. This is a great way to just see where, oops, sorry, skipping over my words. It's a free tool that allows users to create their own plans for petroleum use reduction within their fleets. So if you're not sure how you want to implement alternative fuels into your fleet, this would be a great way for you to plug in numbers and allows you to set annual petroleum use, reduction goals, and include the entire Clean Cities portfolio of alternative fuels to help you meet these goals. It can be used as a guide for future fleet purchases, strategies, and allow multiple scenarios to discover what strategies work best for your emissions, petroleum use, and budgetary goals, because everybody is different. And heavy-duty searches. For light and heavy-duty, you can customize your search by fuel type, manufacturer, other options. This tool is helpful for managers, again, And for example, a fleet that is looking into utilizing natural gas is able to locate and read about types of light-duty and heavy-duty vehicle technologies, and they have links to manufacturers and vehicle specs on here as well. And this is a great tool that we use a lot when we get calls from our members. It's one of the most useful and popular tools on the AFDC website. It's the station locator for organizations. It allows you to search the type of fuel you're looking for, the zip code, where those stations are. Not many of the private stations are necessarily on there, but the results are just, it has the hours, the address, phone numbers, method of payment they accept, and if you choose to, you can download the file to your phone, or you can just do this cool nifty little app for users. It has a mobile version, so you can just download it in the iPhone or smartphone app. It's free, and it recommends that you call ahead though for the stations to ensure they are open and what form of payment you can use, because I know that municipalities a lot have different cards that you have to use to get into the different private or public stations to actually pay for your fuel. So the AFDC cost calculator, really quickly, it's just a calculator that compares lifetime ownership. This is more for, it's a good tool, but it's more for the person looking into if they want to just purchase the vehicle. You can choose from thousands of models that are available. The tool, total cost of ownership, annual fuel use, operating costs, cost per mile, and your annual greenhouse gas emissions that you would reduce. And you can also look up case studies. We talked about that with our YouTube channel, different future programs, alternative fuels, advanced vehicles, and different success stories for clean cities. And fueleconomy.gov, this website, partnership with the US EPA, it's to find a car tool, compare vehicles side by side, look at different vehicle economy ratings. You can also find other information you might want to know about buying a vehicle. And there is also a mobile fueleconomy.gov that allows you to access many of the site's features from your phone as well. And other additional resources, US EPA SmartWay program, Natural Gas Vehicle for America, and just the information from Argonne. Argonne developed a fleet tool for clean city stakeholders to estimate petroleum use, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollutant emissions, and cost of ownership as well. And you can definitely find all of that on the Clean Cities website. And it's a great tool, a little intuitive for somebody who might not be that savvy with all that information, and that is something that our Clean Cities coalitions can definitely help you out with and hopefully make your life easier when looking into that. And let me see if I have a question. Let me get to this last slide. These are just other resources, and again, this will be available afterwards because I know there's a lot of different information. And we encourage you at least just to visit these websites for immediate technical response of alternative fuels, advanced technologies. You can contact your coalition, and these are our upcoming events that we have with mainly Wisconsin. There's a lot more on all of our websites, but these are just the Wisconsin events coming up and a few of Chicago's. And there are on our South Shore Clean Cities, Wisconsin Clean Cities, and I believe Chicago, they all have a members only page. And I'll just show you that quickly. When you become a member and you log in, you are given a passcode to log in. And we put all of the up-to-date information on our websites for our members only. So if you are a member and want to check that out but don't know your username or password, just let us know and we can help you out with that. But we try to keep our members informed of all of the upcoming funding opportunities, different events that are for members only, and you have a member network database that you can contact all of our members in the database, and just other resources that are for specific members. And Wisconsin has the same information on their website. So that is all that I have, and if anybody has any questions, I can take them, but I appreciate everybody hanging in there with us today with our little glitches.
Hey, Steph, did you just want to quickly mention that grant opportunity that we may have coming up?
Yes. Let me just pull up that. I don't have the email in front of me from Carl. And I know this is for Indiana only, but I lied. Wisconsin has it as well. It's in cooperation with Indiana Department of Environmental Management. We are anticipating a grant opportunity within the next several weeks that would allow fleets in Wisconsin and northern Indiana to apply for funding for the diesel-wise. And this would include public, private sectors in reducing diesel emissions. Projects will include, just different infrastructure and alternative fuel vehicle replacements. And if you have any questions, just please contact Erica or I for further information. And somebody is asking, Matthew is asking about Clean Cities careers. There are jobs listed on the Clean Cities website, and if there's not, it's on the Argonne National Labs website, because that is where Clean Cities, all their information comes from, and that's in Illinois. And when will details about be available on? I'll have to get back to you on that question, Matt. And I'll also look up the historic alternative fuel for your state as well and get back to you.
Okay, thank you, Steph. We will open it up to any more questions. If anyone has questions, just please type them into the question box and we will try and get them answered for you quickly.
And also, as we've done in the past, feel free to send in questions at any time, and we can reply to you or try to post it up on our websites as well. So if we don't have questions now, we can finish this up, and we'll definitely get back to anyone or any additional questions that come through.
This is Jeff at the City of Milwaukee. I just wanted to pass something on here. A lot of questions that we've been getting from our CNG users is why does it not seem that they get a full fill during the winter? And I think I'd like to maybe throw that towards Ted, because sometimes our people are getting like 2,300 PSI as a max fill on their trucks, and they think that they're only half full.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is something that we get a lot too. GTI has a fueling station here down near O'Hare, and we get the same questions from people at our stations. And it's a difference between having a gas and a liquid fuel. So if you think of filling up a balloon, I guess is probably a good example for a common day use of a gas. But if you think of your vehicle tank as a balloon and you fill it up and there's a given amount of gas in it, when that balloon gets cold, it actually gets smaller because the pressure goes down. And when that balloon gets hot, the balloon gets bigger because the pressure goes up. There's no different amount of fuel or no different amount of gas in that balloon. It just gets bigger and smaller because pressure changes with temperature. And that's what's happening with your vehicle. When it's cold, the pressure goes down, and so you're not getting high pressure, but you're getting the same amount of gas in there. And when you'll notice on really hot days, you'll get very high pressures, but you might not be getting as much fuel because the pressures get high, and the dispenser will actually stop dispensing it given some given pressures. But you're right, what people often perceive as not being full, because the only way your fuel gauge on your vehicle works is by looking at that pressure. Your pressures will go down in the cold, but you're really getting the same amount of natural gas in there. It's just denser. if that makes sense. But the reason that they do change that pressure that they fill up to is a very important safety reason. When you're at -20, say, like we had this winter, you'll only fill up to, you know, say 2100 psi or something like that. But if you take that vehicle and you need to have some maintenance done on it, and so you pull it into your garage, and your garage is sitting at 70 degrees, well, that vehicle that's filled up to 2100 psi will go into a garage, and the gas will heat up to 70 degrees, and it should go right to 3600. But if you filled up that vehicle outside at -20 and put in 3600 psi, and then you drive into your maintenance shop and it heats up 90 degrees, well, your pressure is going to go very high, and that's a potentially dangerous situation. So that's why that temperature compensation is so important.
Well, that makes sense. We actually did notice a little joke was played on us at one of our stations that is a 24/7 retail operation. Somebody put a sticker on the pump advertising lower prices at various other locations, other providers of CNG, and then they put a sticker on below that that said, with 3700 psi year-round, exclamation point. And we found that to be kind of interesting.
I shouldn't laugh, because I mean, that's really, it's unsafe. It's very unsafe to not use temperature compensation, and it's illegal. It's outside of the codes and standards for natural gas fueling. There is another phenomena with, for those that are still on and still interested, there's another phenomena for getting full fills with natural gas. During filling of a natural gas vehicle tank, there's heat created. It's called the heat of compression. It just happens when you're pushing a lot of fuel into a tank. The gas heats up, and so what that does is it raises the pressure. And so dispensers are made to stop fueling at some set pressure. And so if that fueling is set to stop at a lower pressure, that heat of compression can cause your vehicle and to be full, according to the dispenser, at a lower pressure. And so there is some amount of fill space at the top end of a fill that you may not realize, depending on the dispenser and depending on the ambient temperature. So, it's likely that unless you're using a time fill station where the fills happen essentially without the heat of compression, it's likely that you won't get a fully full tank at a fast fill station. So that'll happen regularly, and that can change. It can be 10% under, it can be 20% under. And that's actually something where it being cold can help you out because depending on how the heat of compression tables are set up in the dispenser, you can get denser gas on cold days. Even if your high-end pressure, even if your full pressure is just 2200 psi, say, you could still have more gas in your tank. But if anyone would like to ask questions or discuss the physics of natural gas filling, please feel free to email or call anytime.
I got a question. We were talking about CNG and LPG, but are any of you guys using LNG? And if you are, how do you compare to CNG in fuel economy?
So LNG is not part of our current program, and it's not concentrated on maybe quite as much with the Clean Cities group, just because it's not used as much. But it is starting to really catch on in some certain applications in long-haul fleets and people that need a higher energy density than CNG can provide. GTI has some experience doing research and development on LNG. We don't have an LNG fueling station there actually isn't an LNG fueling station in Illinois, though there are some being built for private fleets, and potentially one or a couple for public fleets as well. As far as fuel economy goes, it's very similar to CNG because it gets, before it goes to the engine, it gets vaporized and turned back into natural gas. There is a slight difference in the fuel composition just because to turn natural gas into liquefied natural gas, it has to be cooled down to around negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit. So there are some compounds that drop out. In general, though, the energy content is similar. So on a standard cubic foot to standard cubic foot basis, it's essentially the same as CNG. The difference comes in that, you know, when you're storing it in your vehicle tank as a liquid gallon, the energy density is very different. So you just have to be careful when you're comparing those. And then also, a liquid gallon of LNG does not have the same energy content as a liquid gallon of diesel, say. It is lower.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but it does allow for extended range over CNG.
I noticed, I read an article that UPS is, you know, purchasing a bunch of CNG and LNG Class A trucks in the southern region of the United States, and they just purchased 1,000 step vans that go on propane. So this is just going to get really interesting really quick around here.
Yeah, and they're expanding LNG and CNG in the Midwest as well. They're building an LNG station in the southern suburbs of Chicago right now, and they have a couple, I believe, 200-ish trucks that will be running on LNG around the Midwest soon. But yeah, they've been a great fleet using all alt fuels, and they're very experienced in, you know, trying to apply the right fuel to the right vehicle and to the right region. It proves how well you can do if you do your homework and educate everyone in your company.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, well, it looks like we don't have any more questions coming in. Again, this webinar, along with the slides, will be available on the Wisconsin Clean Cities, the South Shore Clean Cities, and the Chicago Area Clean Cities website. So I just want to say thank you again for attending the Clean Cities Best Practices for End Users for CNG, LPG, and Electricity webinar. Thank you to the presenters for participating, and have a great week, everyone.